What's on, where, and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. NBS Talk Nelson.
At NBS, we believe in banking for life. For over 160 years, we've been a trusted banking provider for generations of locals like you. We know our clients personally and build long-term relationships with them, offering flexibility by giving our staff freedom to make quick decisions to put them first. Experience banking for life with NBS.
The Mako Rugby Roundup.
Welcome to the Mako Rugby Roundup. I'm Chris Butler, and welcome back to Les Edwards. Good to have you here, mate.
Yes, pleased to be here.
We're thrilled to bring you all things rugby in the top of the South, and today a very special guest, Peter Barr, who's the former CEO of the Tasman Rugby Union. Great to have you here, Peter.
Great to be with you.
Before we dive in, a big shout out to our venue sponsor, the Turf Hotel. They're on Main Road, Stoke, and thank you to Stan and the team for their continued support. Thursday night, you're in luck again, Les. If you haven't been so far, jam night. So
Thank you.
we still haven't found out what musical instrument
The air guitar for me.
the air guitar. On Friday night, it's DJ Tripper. So you can dance the night away. On Saturday, Kick, they always put on a good show. And Sunday, the meat raffle, $2,500. That's a big roast for a Sunday night. In this episode, we'll cover the latest rounds of First 15 Rugby, senior men's and women's, and of course, the Super Rugby final, the big showdown. But as we pointed out before, great pleasure to have Peter Barr here. Peter, former CEO of Tasman Rugby Union, but you did go on to other things. But what are you up to these days?
Well, I'm retired, playing a lot of golf, but I'm also working with the Nelson Tasman Housing Trust. I'm the deputy chair and chair of the fundraising committee. So it's a volunteer role, so it's giving something back to the community.
Yeah, so that's been in the news recently, hasn't it? Because the new government were talking about they suggested they might be supporting community organisations with building more homes. Can you tell us a little bit about what they do?
Well, the thing is that there's a huge demand for social and affordable housing, and not only across the country, but also in Nelson Tasman. There's probably 300-400 people applying for social housing through the Ministry of Social Development. And on top of that, there's probably another 400 or 500 that haven't even applied, but are living in cars, caravans, motor camps, motels. And it's a serious problem. So there is a high need for new affordable and social housing. And so we're very much a part of that. We have 54 homes at the moment. We've got 6 under development at the moment. We have another 14 that will start building within the next couple of months. And by 2028, we hope to have 120. So
wow,
it's a big program.
Geez, like quite a sizable building company.
Yeah. Well, we have the assistance of Jenny and Homes that do all our building for us.
Right.
We get funding from philanthropic donations, from government, from the Nelson City Housing Reserve. The trust's in really good shape financially, and we have the ability to borrow off the ASB Bank as well.
And so do you buy the land off private investors?
Yeah, we buy the land. So we've bought land in Waimea Road onto Kauai Street. We have a big property that we bought out in Dodson Valley Road. We bought some land out in Richmond. So yeah, no, we're always looking for more.
Right.
And so with that announcement from the government, are there bright signs, or is that still in the detail?
Well, that's true. There's still very much to come out of the detail, but we're hearing that they want to give more money to what we call CHIPs, which are the community housing providers, such as ourselves, or Housing for Humanity. I know there's about 140 million that's being put aside for housing providers to build 1,500 homes. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting a share of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, cross fingers.
Indeed.
Okay, well, let's get into it, Les. We'll come back to Peter in more detail about a big history with rugby in the region, but first 15 rugby.
Yes, so Waimea Combined continue their good form by beating Ashburton Schools at home 17-3.
So that's
they're having a good
are we
season.
playing unbeaten, aren't we, so far?
Yeah, well, yes, they've had a draw and a bunch of wins, so they're travelling very, very well. Marlborough Boys College had their second loss of the season. They lost to Christ College in Christchurch, 43-7. And then on Tuesday, Nelson College thumped Shirley Boys High School 57-19. So, yeah, the Nelson College side is Peter, you know about this storied team and school. So they just continue to rage on, don't they?
Well, they've had incredible success over the last 5 years, and they've got great coaches, which makes a huge difference. And obviously they've got a lot of talent as well. So it's looking good for hopefully for the Mako going forward if these boys continue to stay in the region.
Well, that's why we focus on first 15 rugby, because these three feeder school teams are very, very important, as you say, for the future of the Mako.
Yeah, and we've talked about, past teams, the talent they've had, and this new bunch that are coming through, they just seem to be taking it to another level, which is just fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I see success on the horizon this year to match some of the great achievements of the recent past.
Okay, how are they lining up for round 5?
So Waimea Combined are away to Horomaka Combined. That's at Hornby High on Saturday. So good luck, Waimea Combined, with that bus trip. And then Nelson College are playing the quadrangular tournament next Tuesday and Thursday. One of those games will be against Christ College, which will count towards the first 15 competition. But quadrangular is such a big deal in college rugby, and to host it in Nelson for these boys will be fun for them.
Well, it's their highlight of their rugby within the college system. I mean, the quadrangular has been around for over 100 years, I believe. So it is a very important tournament. Has a lot of prestige for the players.
Yeah, that's right. And the great thing, I mean, it's great to have the teams in Nelson for a start, but the great thing about playing on your home patch is the whole school comes out.
Oh, and the old boys.
Yeah, that's right. It's
a
huge crowd.
Yeah, there are events scheduled for the old boys to all get together from the 4 schools, and there's a lot going on. It's a really big occasion, and as Peter said, a highlight of these young men's college careers.
Yeah, and if the ground is up to it, which with the revamp should be able to.
Yep.
Being able to play it all on that front field in the cauldron, it's quite a, for visiting teams, quite an atmosphere, and a big home advantage. So we wish them all the best of luck. Okay, senior men's Tasman Trophy, and how did they wash up on the weekend, Les?
Well, Nelson had a home game in Blenheim. A penalty for defaulting earlier in the season.
Okay.
So they went over to Lansdowne Park, lost that game 67-14. Kahurangi went over to Spring Creek and beat Motory 66-5 convincingly. And then in the match of the round, Stoke were hosting Waimea Old Boys. It was a John Goodman Challenge Trophy game, and by all accounts, just a remarkably good game that Stoke were able to prevail 27-23, scoring a try, I believe, in the last minute or so. So, Stoke get to put that trophy away in the cabinet for the summer.
Geez, it would have been a great atmosphere, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So on Saturday, I can't remember what the weather was doing. Oh, actually, I was in Christchurch, that's why. But it was Sunday it pulled down, so it wasn't too bad on...
No, Saturday was a rugby day.
Good running track. Yeah. So, would have been a great game to watch. But congratulations to Stoke. Waimea will be just bitterly disappointed. Round 13, and how do they line up for this week? And we'll do our picks, Les.
Yeah, so importantly, let's just look at the table. So, you've got Kahurangi leading with 42 points, closely followed by Central with 39, Stoke on 37, and Marist on 31, Waimea Old Boys on 28. So these 5 teams are all having a crack at the final top four.
Mm-hmm.
So, results this weekend, the second to last round of regular season, are very important. So Stoke are heading over to Central and playing at Lansdowne Park. You've got Waimea Old Boys hosting Motory, and then you've got Kahurangi playing Marist with Nelson having the bye. So, if you look at these games, it's going to have a bearing on that top four significantly.
Okay, let's go around the table. Central versus Stoke, Peter. You don't have to have in-depth knowledge. You just have to take your best shot.
I think hometown advantage will give the game to Central.
They're starting to fire, aren't they, Central? Because they had a couple of tip-ups earlier.
Yeah, they were a very, very good team. There's not a lot of change to their premiership team of last year. Stoke have to get on the bus, as you say, so that makes it a bit more difficult. But yeah, it's a great game. 2 plays 3. It'll be one to watch.
And Motory have to pick themselves up and come over to Jubilee Park. So after, getting quite a few points against them. So, they're going to be wanting to, I guess, improve on that. So Waimea might be out for a tough game. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think Motory are just, it's the end of the season. They've done it tough with a smaller squad, younger squad. They've had key players missing. I think they're just struggling at this time of the year. They're rebuilding, of course. Just great to have Motory back in the competition, but Kahurangi will be Waimea Old Boys will be far too strong, which has a big impact on the next game because Waimea Old Boys 28, Marist on 31. Waimea Old Boys can jump into 4th spot if Marist don't deal with Kahurangi at Sports Park Motueka.
And we're going to call that one, Peter, and he's not allowed to tip.
Well, I'm going with the hometown advantage again.
Oh, yes.
And Kahurangi have been strong all year. Marist have been a bit up and down. I believe they've had issues with not enough players for the bench and a few injuries. So, yeah, I think Kahurangi will win that. It could be close, though.
They even said to Les, if you're coming over, bring your boots. So.
That
is desperate.
Yes, but it would also lower the average age of our bench. You got Con Barrel, who's been running out there age 57, and Seta Sawira running out there at age 41. Me at a young 35, but definitely
That's right.
lower the age.
Well, it's going to become very interesting, and all games are starting to have a meaning now, aren't they? As we get towards that pointy end. Senior Women's Tasman Trophy, round 7, and how did that go?
Well, Marist are continuing their winning ways, but they had to work very, very hard against Kahurangi, finally winning 39-36 over in Rewaka. And Waimea Old Boys hosted Motory, went down by 36-29. So,
quite close games, aren't they?
Yeah, they are close games. This week, we've got Kahurangi hosting Waimea Old Boys at Sports Park Mott as the first game of a doubleheader, and Motory are hosting Marist over at Awarua Park.
Big points, a lot of points. So
yeah. So Marist are leading the comp on 30, Kahurangi's second spot on 17, and that's fundamentally because they've had a default. And Motory and Waimea Old Boys 10 points each. So the top two, look like it's going to be Marist and Kahurangi as it was last year.
Senior Men Division 2, we always like to highlight a couple of the regional games. So who have you picked for us?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to my Marist club who upset the undefeated Division 2 team, Stoke, 13-10 at Tahuna Nui Fields. And I called in on them after the game, and they were very, very pleased with themselves. When you topple the undefeated team in last year's premiers, then it's a big deal. So they celebrated long and hard. And then the game of this week, I think, is the Battle of the Bridge, Peter. You know about this one.
Look, it was always my favourite game to go and watch. Even with the Premier Rugby, going over to, particularly going to Collingwood and watching them play Takaka, and just the parochialism, just a great atmosphere, and the fact that you end up in the club rooms afterwards and everyone's a buddy, and it's just good rural rugby. And I remember even staying over there night and getting on the terps with them.
Door Strange,
Door Strange,
those characters.
Yeah,
And they are
Duncan
characters.
McKenzie. Yeah.
They are characters. They're wonderful people, and that's the highlight of Div 2 and Nelson Bays. In Marlborough, it's Central hosting Renwick, so that's a 1v2 game, so top of the table clash.
Yep. So Stoke leading the way, Hui are not far behind Wanderers, and Tarkaga not far behind.
Yeah.
So that's very close race. And then in Marlborough, we've got Renwick and Central not far behind, Waitohi not far behind, and a bit of a distance with Awatere there. So, it's in both divisions getting very tight towards the pointy end of the season. Super Rugby, it was the semi-finals, and the Blues 34 over the Brumbies 20. Les, I mean, you can never say quite comfortable, but the Blues did the job well and truly, didn't they?
Well, they got the job done. I think the Brumbies shot themselves in the foot. Every time they scored, they then failed to collect the restart and did that 3 times. You just put yourself under huge pressure if you're not going to claim your kickoff receipt. So it was a game that the Brumbies would be really kicking themselves that they weren't closer, because I think the Blues were off their game a little bit in this one, but 34-20, they're into the final. They don't care, right?
No, totally. And they've been good at home. And they're playing a style of rugby that the Crusaders used to play. They still do play. Win it up front and eventually get it out to your backs to score the tries. And that's what they've done all season, and they're good at it.
Bit of an upset in my, although must have a shout out to Stephen Cornter, because he called the Chiefs, didn't he?
He did.
He said, I'm going to say that, so I get a call out. Well, there you go, Stephen. The Chiefs brought it to them, didn't they? And the Hurricanes just couldn't respond.
An amazingly good start. 17-0 after 14 minutes, I think, from memory. And, I was saying to the people I was watching it with, it's very hard to come back from that sort of scoreline that early. You could always say there's lots of minutes left on the clock, but it's very tough, because you've got something to defend, haven't you? And the Chiefs are great.
You're starting to play catch up, aren't you?
Yeah. The Chiefs are great. Duncan, I keep saying that. Damien McKenzie is just in superb form, and I've got to say I'll be hugely surprised if he's not the starting All Black 10. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think he's just in really good form, and someone like Razor Robertson could build an attacking play around him, can't they?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the Chiefs, their star players all played well. Anton Leonard-Brown had a great game. Damien McKenzie. And the guy that really has had 4 more years is number 8, is Satiti.
Yes.
He was just outstanding, although I'd have to say the first try was pretty soft because there was some missed tackles by Geordie Barrett, which was a bit surprising, and TJ Perenara. But they deserve to win, and they probably play more knockout rugby than the Hurricanes have, and so they're more experienced at that.
I think Satiti brings speed to the number 8 role. He is a quick human, and I'm not talking about the intercept because he was a bit off balance with that run, but the charge he made that led to that try that you're talking about, the quickness, he just put space between him and the defenders. So the Satutu-Satiti matchup,
that's right. That's right.
Is going to be one that the fans will be watching.
Well, let's talk about that. It sold out. I heard
very quickly,
which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Eden Park, the Blues do have the home ground advantage, but as you say, the Chiefs have just missed out before, and they do know finals footy. So, what are we calling?
Peter, I'll leave it to you.
It's tight. It's tight. Yeah. I mean, obviously the Blues have the hometown advantage. They've played well all year, but again, the Chiefs know how to play finals footy, and they lost last year to the Crusaders. They'll be lamenting that, and but the critical, they've lost their hooker, and also might have lost their second string hooker. We haven't heard yet, and they're 2 critical players on their side, and that might just tip it in favour of the Blues, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summation. For mine, if Samasoni Tokiyahu was on the park matching up with Asafo Amur, I'd be a lot more confident for the Chiefs. I really would. I think they would negate each other. Now I think under Vern Cotter, the Blues pack could just probably do enough to get ascendancy, and both backlines are terrific. So, hey, I'm going to go Blues 12 and under at home, Chris, but this could go either way. What do you reckon?
Well, I think just the home ground advantage. I mean, it's going to be packed with blue. The atmosphere is going to be huge, and although I think that it's easy for a lot of Waikato people to drive up the road and catch the match, I just think that home ground advantage will get them across the line. But
although we did say that the Hurricanes had hometown
yes,
advantage,
that's right.
They were going to win, and they didn't.
No, they didn't. They absolutely stumbled at the post. Yeah,
well,
and the Chiefs did bring it.
By the Chiefs just took the crowd out of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're with the Mako Rugby Roundup. It's a great pleasure to welcome Peter Barr to our podcast. Peter, you joined Nelson Bay's Rugby Union in January 1999. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing prior to that and what attracted you to that role?
Sure. Well, I was in the oil industry and had been for 23 years with BP, working both in New Zealand and offshore. And when I decided to leave BP, I was in a senior executive position, and I was away from home a lot. And I had 2 young children, and I wasn't really seeing them, so I decided to get out of the corporate world, and we were going to come to Nelson, and where my wife was from. And I looked at a couple of business opportunities, but they didn't come to fruition. And then I saw an advertisement for the chief executive of Nelson Bay's Rugby Union, and having a passion for the game, I thought, well, this might be an interesting role. So I came down and had an interview with the then chairman, Max Spence, and the deputy chair, David Kenning, and the president, Roy Tomlinson. And David I had met back in 1981 when I was working for BP here in Nelson, and he and I were in round table together. So anyway, that was I got the job, and I started on about the 1st of January, about the 6th of January in 99.
Was that a bit of a bolt out of the blue for them? Would have they expected an application from someone like you?
Look, I don't know. I don't know how many people applied. I might have been the only one. I know. So, look, I don't know.
Because I'm guessing that you didn't. I mean, Max kind of got involved with rugby actually through football and was administrator at Stoke and sort of came through those ranks, whereas your skill sets came from another field. So, when you sat down, they must have thought, oh, hang on,
how lucky are we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they obviously saw the skill sets that potentially need to be required for that role.
Well, whilst I was passionate about rugby, I was a broken down hockey player. So, but I could bring business skills to the union, which was probably what it needed at that time. I mean, the board was aspirational, and they were looking for a change.
You spent 6 years guiding the union until the end of 2005, NBC. So what were the biggest highlights in that era?
Well, there were many. The first one that springs to mind was the final in 99, when Warren Johnson kicked a goal from the sideline to win against Bay of Plenty. And that was, being in my first year, winning the second division was pretty special. But look, the other fond memories I have are, when I started, there was only two and a half full-time equivalents. So we were pretty small, and we were housed in the back of the pavilion at Trafalgar Park in a little cubbyhole, basically. And so we really started with nothing. And by the time I left in 2005, we had $1 million in the bank.
Wow.
So that was pretty special. Hosting the first Crusaders game at Trafalgar Park was another highlight. And I think we're going to talk about that a little further. But and look, just the growth of the organisation, bringing on more staff that were really capable. it was a team effort, really. It wasn't all about me.
Some of the players from that era, who are some notables that you can remember?
Well, there's a lot of them, and that's the reason why we're successful. I mean, the fact is that during that time I was there, we were never out of the semi-finals, so we had to have a good side, and the likes of the Mark Mills, the Wazza or Warren Johnson, Corey Holdaway, who came and played for us for one season. He came from the Rye Valley. He was an outstanding player and played in the New Zealand under-19 team. And then we had Graham Ching, who was an outstanding number 7. Blair Murphin, who came from Mekamatuhua. He was as tough as nails, and he was probably the best scrummager in the country at that time. And you couldn't budge him in the scrum. So they were some of the players. I mean, there were many. Kelvin Highford was the captain. He was a policeman, and he played number 8, and he was a great player. And look, there'll be others that I've missed, but they were a good team.
Just a couple that I know of that played in the latter years of your Nelson Bays tenure. So Robbie Melnick came on the scene with Nelson Bays and ended up playing a huge number of games for them. Also Mark Bright.
Brady.
Was another one who ended up coming back and playing some.
Well, they played for the Mako.
They both ended up playing for the Mako. So good players.
So in 2006, there was the newly formed Tasman Rugby Union, of which you didn't lead. So what happened there?
Well, if I just take it back a step, I mean, there was myself and Max Spence and David Kenning and Shane Drummond who went over to Marlborough, over the hill, to talk to colleagues over there about amalgamation. And, after a long period of time of negotiation, that came to fruition. And I thought, whilst I was a Wellingtonian who'd come into the region, it didn't take me long to become a fierce adversary with Marlborough. I loved beating them as much as anyone.
Right.
And I really felt that the Tasman Union needed a new leadership, someone that was quite independent of the two provinces, because whilst we had agreed to go ahead, there were people that didn't agree with it. And so perhaps having someone from outside the region who could bring a different focus and had no parochialism would help. So I decided to move on.
But you did end up coming back only, 3 seasons later. You came back as CEO of Tasman in 2008, replacing Lee Jamon. What were the circumstances and who approached you to take on the role?
I was actually managing the Green Acres Golf Club at that time, and I got a call from Max, who was a good friend of mine, and we'd always kept in touch, after I'd left in 2005, and he asked me whether I'd come back, and because they were having financial difficulties, and they needed someone to sort of manage the turnaround, if you like. So I went back not really understanding how dire the situation was, but I was up for the challenge.
So how stressful was that period? We're talking 2008, 2010. There's a fair level of distrust between Nelson Bays and Marlborough in that time.
Well, let's put it this way: my father never had grey hair. Look, I mean, it was stressful. In that first week that I was back, the BNZ from Wellington came over, the senior managers, and gave us the ultimatum that if we didn't sell Lansdowne Park, they would sell it for us, because we had reneged on some principal payments, and whilst they had given us some opportunity to pay those principal payments back, we just didn't have the money. And so they put the ultimatum on. And so I had to, they gave us 2 weeks really to find a way of selling it. And so I went over, the natural purchaser was the Marlborough District Council. So I went over and spoke to them, and they said no. and I got wind that Ngātahu were looking for some land to build a supermarket and a Bunnings. So through a contact, we approached Ngātahu, who said they were interested, which would have meant that we'd have sold off part of Lansdowne Park. And the general rugby public over there got wind of it, and all hell let loose. And there were letters to the editor of the Marlborough Express, and in the end, the Marlborough District Council thought, well, we've got no option here. This is the jewel in the crown of Marlborough Rugby, but also a great facility for the Marlborough District, and to see it going into a Bunnings and a supermarket wouldn't have been an ideal situation. So they bought it. So that helped us pay off the BNZ Bank, but certainly went out of the quagmire. But that was really the start of pulling us out. And it was stressful, but I had a fantastic finance manager in Leanne Hutchison, who was just outstanding. And she had great financial nous. She was hard-nosed, and she didn't let the players pull the wool over her eyes. And the other thing that was stressful about it was the fact that the players were, when I had to count up the number of contract players that we had. I think we had 52 contracted players when I stepped in. Well, you can't put 52 players out on a rugby field at any one time. So we slashed
and you had
that.
10 cars.
Yeah, we had lots of cars. So we slashed the number of players we contracted, and fair, I give credit to the players. I mean, they understood the situation we were in, and so they took a cut in pay as well. So, but we turned it around, but it was stressful.
But at the same time, New Zealand Rugby are agitating to get rid of 4 teams out of the NPC, including Tasman.
On top of that,
so you were part of the team along with Chairman Max Spence and Coach Todd Blackadder that pitched New Zealand Rugby to be kept in the comp. What are your memories of that presentation?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you say, they were looking to take 4 teams. Well, they were talking of taking out 2, and then they just talked about taking 4 teams out of the competition, going from 14 down to 12, and they talked about 10. But anyway, so we had to go and make a presentation to the New Zealand board to save ourselves. But before we made a presentation, Northland Rugby went in before us. And their chairman was Wayne Peters, who's the brother of Winston Peters. And they had another guy who happened to be a gentleman by the name of Wayne Brown, who was the Far North District Council mayor, who subsequently is now the mayor of Auckland. And if you know his personality, he went in there with all guns blazing, and he tore the New Zealand Rugby Union apart. And that wasn't helpful for them from their point of view. And having known that, we thought, well, we'll go in and show the respect that we should give to the New Zealand Rugby Union board. And so Max did the first presentation. He talked about the vision of the union and why we amalgamated and how we wanted to give our players the opportunity to play at the most senior level of provincial rugby. And he was really articulate and got his message across. And I presented on the financial situation of the union and how we were going to continue to fund ourselves in the Premier League. And then Todd finished it off with an incredibly emotional, heartfelt presentation, really talking about the players and the team. And collectively, it was a great presentation. And we came away thinking, that was a really compelling case, and there's no way they can keep us out.
And you're right.
And as it turned out, we won.
Yeah. The phone call, I remember. So who came? I can't remember. Max said who rung him up to say you're in. All Black.
An All Black.
Yeah, an All Black. Ex-All Black. He was on the board at the time. Unfortunately, no longer with us. But anyway, yeah, Max tells about getting the phone call. Surprisingly to many, you decided to end in 2011 and stand down as CEO. But how satisfying to start that reverse and the losses and what you've gone through, and then leaving the union effectively in a surplus.
Well, I'd done 6 years with Nelson, excuse me, with Nelson Bays, and then another 4 years with Tasman. Excuse me, and I was a great believer that you always leave a place in a better situation than when you came in. And we had turned around the financial situation. And I was tired, to be quite frank. It was incredibly stressful. And, you didn't sleep much because you're always worrying about where your next dollar was coming from. But I knew that it was my time to move out and for someone new to come in and take the union forward. And so, yeah, I handed my notice in, and 6 months later, I was working for the Nelson Pine Industries.
The board members and staff members who gave you support, who was around that time, and who did you have to lean on quite a bit?
Well, I mean, the board, the Nelson Bays board and the Tasman board in my day were aspirational. And it's hard to single anyone out, but there were probably 3 from the early days of Tasman and Nelson Bays that were really important in guiding the union, and they were Max, obviously, and David Kenning, and Drummy. Drummy was a very passionate man about rugby. David was very strategic, and Max was very passionate and a good leader of men. So they were really important in helping me. But then, unfairly, Max got criticised by particularly Marlborough, and so he, in the best interest of the union, resigned, and we brought on Nick Patterson. And Nick Patterson was outstanding. He was an outstanding person. He was very experienced in chairing organisations, and he had a very different style from Max, but he was the man for the moment, and he took us through that rough period where there was a lot of animosity between particularly from Marlborough. And when we went to have these meetings over in Marlborough and talk about selling Lansdowne Park or the financial issues we had, he was outstanding. People had trust in his leadership, and so I've got great admiration for them. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the staff, again, it's pretty unfair to single anyone out, but I'd have to say that certainly Leanne, she was my rock, really, and she was just the right person to assist in bringing the financial situation, turning it around. But in my latter years with Tasman, I'd have to blow the trumpet of Les here, who brought professionalism, passion, and personality to the marketing and fundraising side. And it was sadly lacking in that area, really, in the commercial side. And Les did a great job in that area. And then one other person that I will single out was Janelle Strickland, who in the very early years, she did a great job in helping the players with their personal development. And then she went on to become the manager, the first woman manager of a provincial team in New Zealand. And she was highly respected by the players. She was really efficient. And she went on to higher levels with team management, and she's still involved with the Black Ferns now. She was with the women's sevens. Yep. So she very, very talented, and she did a great job for Tasman.
Yeah, we had her on the podcast, and
I do. Okay.
her story is remarkable, Peter, and she was extremely efficient. I'll say that. but very likable as well. And that's really important. And we've been lucky with the Mako to have a string of very, very good team managers.
They're so important.
Yeah.
We have some characters who were managers and but did cause us issues.
I'll just continue that train of thought and just say a shout out to Martin Verco and Stu Hunter, and now Hugh Bainan, who have continued, the high aspirational level of management that we expect that Janelle set.
Yeah, it's critical.
I'm just thinking about her story though. She talks about, she came in a slightly different role, or as you said, she was doing sort of player development, wasn't it? Personal development. And then she started learning the management side. So it's that growth within, the organisation itself, giving her a go, because she said there wasn't, if any, many women managers at that level, and the people around them, her and that organisation, gave her the confidence to surge and the encouragement to surge on. So that says a lot, doesn't it? Within the growth within the organisation. Yeah. 2011, you didn't, win a premiership at the time, but there were, I think the support from the public was the fact that they could see within the players, they gave it a good crack, didn't they? They went for it. So who are some of the characters within the early days of the Mako?
I took a lot of satisfaction of seeing local players excel. For instance, got the Tom and James Marshalls, Robbie Melnick, Mark Bright, Joe Wheeler, Quentin McDonald. I mean, they were players in the early days that they were homegrown. And then some more latterly, you had the James Lowe's of this world, who obviously went on to higher levels internationally. A lot of them coming out of Nelson College. Ethan Blackadder was another one. And then, you had players that came into the province, given the opportunity through the Mako, who had been really successful. I mean, the Tim Perrys of this world, who ended up being an All Black. Alex Ainley, who was one of the longest serving players of the Marcos, Finlay Christie, Alex Nankivell.
That 2011 side with those young local players, they were very young. And then they grew. 2012, won a championship in 2013. So that 2011 side was very, very important.
And of course you had players like David Havili and Mitchell Hunt,
Absolutely.
Again, local.
Yeah, Liam Squire. It was
Liam Squire, yeah.
It was just
he
remarkable.
came from out of town.
But he came to town, and no one would think of him as anything other than a local player now.
One other player that I should mention is Andrew Goodman. Goody was
the talisman.
It was a great leader and never had a bad game.
The inspiration behind the fins up too, I might add.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So in 2011, as well as, the Mako, all of a sudden there's a disaster in Christchurch with the earthquakes. There's a disaster in the West Coast with Pike River. And you've got to host 4 Crusaders games. And then the World Cup's coming later in the year. And because of Christchurch not being able to host, we went from 2 Rugby World Cup games to 3. So that must have been an amazing way for you to end your tenure.
First of all, I'll take you back to the first one, which was in my first year with Nelson Bays.
Okay.
And, I'm told in the first week that I'm there that I'm going to host a Super Rugby game in May at Trafalgar Park. And I thought, my God, I know nothing about event management, but anyway, we'll give it a crack. And, with 2.5 of us to organise it and having to put up scaffolding on either side of the pavilion, and we didn't have any ticketing management system in those days. I had to do it all myself, and I sold every ticket, 13,500 of them. And we did bring on Neville Mail as our sort of operations guy who looked after the volunteers. But to see that ground on that day was just unbelievable. In that game, where I think the Crusaders were down 31-7 after about 30 minutes, and came back to win 58-38. It was just unbelievable. But that gave us the confidence to go on, and I have to say the Crusaders were just thrilled with the way we managed that game. And then to go on and do another 3 gave us the experience and the confidence to put a pitch in for hosting the World Cup games. And our pitch was around hosting the Italians because of the Italian background here. And we won those rights to host, as you quite rightly pointed out, 2 games initially, and it ended up being 3. It was a privilege to do it. The whole town got behind us. Now, you all remember, Les, the longest lunch on Trafalgar Street.
Awesome experience.
Those sorts of things you would have never dreamt would have ever happened in Nelson. There was just a buzz about the place, but we couldn't have done it without Rugby World Cup Limited, the NZR, the Nelson City Council, and our own staff. Everyone knew the role they had to play. All I had to do was lead it, and from a local perspective, obviously there were people higher up the chain that were pulling the purse strings, but it was outstanding. We filled the ground for all the games, and USA versus Russia, and the Wallabies playing the last game. It was, as I say, it was a privilege.
I just want to go back to that Pike River experience,
Right.
because that's early in 2011. All of a sudden, the Crusaders need a home, and they decide that they're going to come to Trafalgar Park. You would have been involved in the negotiations for that to get them here. But that was just the most moving.
It was emotional. Yeah.
An emotional day, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
When those 2 teams were standing there before the game, having a minute's silence, it put hairs on them, stand up on the back of your neck.
It was. Were you there?
Yeah.
It was remarkable because it's almost like the crowd wants that emotional silence and whatnot, and honouring, right, the event. They didn't know what to do next, but then all of a sudden someone yelled out, a cheer, and everyone got into the game. But 4 games for the Crusaders that year. They had to travel all over the world to make the final. And I do have a very strong memory of Russia v Australia, because to see Trafalgar Park absolutely heaving with, I think it was 16,000 people. Remarkable sight. And of course the town lit up. Nelson Rugby Football Club, Club Italia, everyone was having a hell of a party.
I've got an overhead photograph on my study wall of the ground on that day, and it's really impressive.
I remember. I can't remember. My partner was on the committee for the Italian club, and I can't remember whether she was at that time, but the massive push and lobbying from the local Club Italia to try and host the Italian team, and they did it.
Yeah,
they got it,
Miccio,
and Aldo Miccio was part of that. Francis Miccio and Francis Lagruda, and and of course a big history amongst the Italian club with with rugby. A lot of them played local club rugby. So, but then for the Italian team to walk in the Club Italia, and it was just fantastic, and all turned out to support them when they played. So it was great.
My last question on that Rugby World Cup. So as I understand it, like New Zealand Rugby gifted or gave Tasman Rugby some money to host those 3 games, and in fact that was the icing on the cake in terms of filling all of the financial holes.
We got a match fee, which was most welcome. But whilst it was fantastic that we were able to host those games, it did take our focus off the local game, and so there was a cost to it. but financially we did okay out of it, no question. And if we had the opportunity to do it again, I mean, I wouldn't hesitate. And just one other thing I'll say about that Rugby World Cup. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to the final and being hosted by the New Zealand Rugby Union. And I drove up, and driving up through provincial New Zealand, it was just outstanding. I mean, everywhere you went, there was black, and there were signs everywhere and balloons. And it was just that the country came together like it never had done before. They talked about the stadium of 5 million. It's exactly what it was. And then that final, I mean, it was just at the end of it was just sheer relief. I mean, it was deathly silence.
It was. Yeah. Come on, Richie, don't play the ball on the ground.
Richie going up to kick it out. Okay. Right. Well, so when you stood down, there were 3 divisions of senior rugby, 12 clubs playing Premier Grade. Now there are 2 divisions and 7 clubs. So presumably you're an outside observer now. Have you got any thoughts around what's happening? Well, definitely in Nelson, but presumably it's right across regional rugby, about what's happening with senior rugby participation.
It's not. It goes right down to the midgets playing the game. I mean, there are less people playing the game. And I think one of the issues is the safety aspect of it. Johnny's mum is saying, no, you're going to play soccer or you're going to play basketball, whatever it might be. So there is that safety aspect that's played a part. We were losing players at secondary school level, and we still do. And it's partly due to the fact, I think, that clubs and colleges have lost that connection. And there's been that battle that's been going on for years about where college players should be playing their game, whether they should be playing for their colleges or whether they should be playing for their clubs. And that debate will rage on into infinitum, in my view. There's no simple answer to it, but I mean, I think maybe there's an opportunity to attract players back, is because you've got to pull them away from whatever else they're doing, whether it be working part-time in the supermarket, or whether they're playing other sports, or whether they're playing on their Xboxes or whatever it might be. You've got to make it attractive and fun for them. And so maybe they need to develop a hybrid game. And I was thinking about that last night. I mean, what would attract players back to the game at the sort of primary school, secondary school level? Maybe they only play 20 minutes each way. And they don't have practices on a Tuesday and Thursday night in the middle of bloody winter. And this hybrid game might be that there's no kicking. That, you keep the ball on hand and you keep it in field. It sounds like it might end up being like rugby league, but maybe you get more points for wingers get more points for scoring tries than forwards.
Number 8s and hookers.
A prop, yeah. So that you're actually getting the ball out wide, and so it becomes more of a running game, and through that it's far more fun, and also the big boys are not dominating the game. But one thing is, you can't stand still. There's got to be change, and you've got to think outside the square, and I'm not sure that they're doing that. Obviously, women have made a difference in bringing them on board, but it is sad to see so many clubs that have just drifted away, and it is also partly due to the fact that the agricultural scene in New Zealand has changed, and it used to be that when you're farming beef and cattle and beef and lamb, you had shepherds, and all those people have gone. It's now horticulture and viticulture, and that's brought in seasonal workers who are not allowed to play the game, or they go home before the season starts.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the case in Marlborough, where all of those farms and they played an agricultural style of rugby. There's no doubt about that. big farmers in the forward packs and whatnot. It's just not there anymore. So yeah, I think that, and also, you know, people are time poor.
That's right. Well, it's not
The timing of games,
Yeah.
lights to
Yeah.
play at night, those sorts of things as well could help.
Yeah, and also I think, you know, we need to find more people that come into volunteer into the clubs. I mean, when I left rugby, you had the same old people, and all due respects to them, I mean, they were holding their clubs together, and they had been for years, and there were no younger people coming through. And you know,
Yeah, that's
when those people that have been managing the clubs for years drift off, you lose your momentum, and people lose interest. And
no, it's definitely a problem, the number of people who've got the time or the inclination to volunteer. Peter, lastly, you know, you mix with people in high places, you know, Mr. Spence, President of New Zealand Rugby. I'm just interested, obviously, you talk over a coffee or a beer occasionally. What's your general consensus on the decision regarding the Pilkington report and the where the provincial unions got to?
right, well, I'm in the interest of protecting Matt, so I will give you my opinion.
Sorry, Max, leave you up the garden path there. We'll get him on.
Mind you, he was referee, wasn't he? You know,
Yeah. No,
I did watch the vote on the video, and he was very good at
he
adjudicating.
presided over the
He
meeting.
presided over the meeting
did.
because Patsy Reedy was overseas. So my opinion, I was bitterly disappointed they didn't go with option one. They need radical change in the organisation. And look, I mean, the Constitution is not fit for purpose any longer. And it hasn't been, even back in my day, I don't think it really was. It's been around since day dot. And the big unions have too much power in my view. And so they've influenced a lot of what has gone on in recent times. And I just felt that, you know, if with option one, where they were looking for a completely independent board, that board and its selection of the board members, there was a matrix of skills and experience that you had to bring. And of course, part of the skills was actually having had understanding of the game. So, you know, whilst some of the provinces were paranoid about the fact that there wasn't anyone there with rugby experience, well, the matrix would have dealt to that. And so what's happened is provincial unions got their way, and we're not going to go forward, in my view. If you look at now, they have the governance advisory panel, who now will select who the committee that will actually select the directors. It seems incredibly bureaucratic, and the provinces still have control over they have control of the gap. They have the most votes, and so to me,
And when you look at those votes, Auckland has 7 votes versus Tasman with 2. There's disparity, isn't it? But anyway,
so it'll be interesting to see who actually is on gap. I think there's 3 provincial unions. Maori also have a representative. The Players Association have a representative. And I'm not sure whether there's any others. Well, we've already heard that the Players Association not putting up a representative. So who knows what might happen. Watch this space, as they say. It's disappointing.
Very good. There was big debate, wasn't there, Les?
no, it's been a huge
About
debate.
that. It was interesting. I guess, you know, because my worry was that you would have an independent board that, you know, might start making decisions that weren't representative of the community game. That was, you know, without going into the detail. But when I watched the vote, what I didn't realise is the fact that, you know, it's based on regions and their player base. And so Auckland has a big say. So what you're saying is that, you know, in those smaller regions, that kind of cuts out any, you know, potential moves. It's not, you know, one provincial vote, one voice, is it? It's,
well, I think, I mean, it probably should be, every province has an equal vote. But it's not the way it is.
No, it's not the way it is.
We'll see what happens. But the thing is that we just don't need this bad publicity at this time. And the other thing is, I mean, if you look at the cricket, they went for a purely independent board, and they lost their way because if you remember, they went from mainstream TV for their for televising their matches to Spark streaming. Well, they lost a lot of their fan base. So if you're going to have an independent board, you've got to make sure that you have directors that understand the game. It's not about just having a whole lot of businessmen and women who have governance experience. It's got to be more than that.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. It's been absolute pleasure having you in here. Massive history, for a guy from Wellington that played hockey.
Well, actually, this conversation gave me some time to sort of reflect, because it's a long time ago.
I mean, what I didn't realise about Max was that he was a football player. He said I was better at football than I was at rugby.
Yeah.
But he, it just goes to show that it's the mix of skill sets that you need in any organisation.
Well, yeah. I mean, Max was, I think, is the only New Zealand rugby president who never played the game.
Yes, well done, Tasman, on promoting him. Peter, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You and I go back to 2010 when I first met you over a couple of coffee meetings, and I liked you then. I like you now. So, great to have you on the podcast.
Both working on your golf scores. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Peter, for coming in. It's been a great pleasure, and a lot of history there. So I'm sure great listening for our listeners. Thank you, Les. All to do this weekend, mate?
Yeah. So Marist have to go to Sports Park Motueka. So yeah, let's go over there and come home with a win. That would be what I'd love.
And where's the TV? Where we end up for the final? So,
yeah,
good question.
It could be at Huia Rugby Club, actually. Stick around after the game.
Motueka Park.
Yeah. You better take a bus, Les.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Good luck this weekend. Our thanks to the Turf Hotel, Main Road, Stoke, Stan and the team. You can catch this podcast and others on talknelson.co.nz or on Spotify on MBS Talk Nelson and our social media channels, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
The Mako Rugby Roundup. What's on, where, and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. NBS Talk Nelson.